Parents, teachers and politicians all agree that the current special educational needs system isn't working. But what's been announced in the major overhaul, and will less children be entitled to support? Let's take it back to the start first. What is SEND? There are so many acronyms. Firstly, SEND stands for Special Educational Needs and Disabilities. It applies to children and young people who need extra support to meet their physical, communication, social, emotional or mental health needs. The Labour government says it inherited a SEND system on its knees. And in 2024, the National Audit Office warned the system was financially unsustainable for councils. And despite a big increase in spending, it wasn't delivering better outcomes for children. About 5% of pupils get the highest level of support through an Education, Health and Care Plan, or EHCP. The figure has more than doubled in a decade, and the government's worried that it will just keep growing. But what is an EHCP? EHCPs, or Education, Health and Care Plans, are legally binding documents which parents can apply for through their local council. The plans vary depending on what each child needs, but they can include things like speech and language therapy or one-to-one time with a teaching assistant. But they can be tricky to secure, and many families face long legal fights before their child gets support. So, are they being scrapped?
Forget the misinformation you might have heard. EHCPs for children with the most complex needs will stay.
The government has just published its long-awaited plans to reform the whole system. And by 2035, it plans for only children with the most complex needs to get EHCPs. And from 2030, those with EHCPs at the moment will also have their needs reassessed as they move through the education system to see if they still need them. For example, between primary school and secondary school. Some families are worried about what that could mean for their children. But the government wants schools, parents and charities to work together on these plans to make sure they're effective. So, what about the children with special educational needs who don't have EHCPs and won't qualify for them in the future? The plan is for them all to have an ISP. This is a new term and it means an individual support plan. It will be a legal right, and the government hopes it will mean children get support more quickly and that fewer end up needing the highest level of support. There are going to be 3 ISP levels. 1, targeted support, which might involve pupils receiving help in small groups or things like coloured paper or laptops for children with dyslexia, for example. 2, targeted plus support, which might mean access to specialists like speech and language therapists or educational psychologists, as well as dedicated SEND spaces in schools. And 3, specialist support for children with the most complex needs. Only children with specialist support packages are intended to qualify for new EHCPs by 2035. The 2 lower levels of ISPs will be made by schools, colleges and nurseries who will consult with parents, and they'll be reviewed at least once a year. But there are some concerns about whether that increases the workload on teachers.
Each school will have to come up with an individual support plan for children. That's more pressure on teachers, isn't it? Not less.
No, I'm afraid that's not quite right. What we're going to do is make sure that more support is available more quickly. So that's through the extra funding that we're putting in.
And many want to know what will be considered the most complex needs. That won't be decided until 2028. There are other legal worries too around protections, as you will only be able to go to tribunal over EHCPs, not targeted and targeted plus. It costs money to make mainstream secondary schools inclusive for pupils with special needs, but the government's spending it. It's announced £4 billion on just that. Adapting a mainstream school could mean making it accessible for wheelchair users, or more SEND training for staff, and making SEND experts available to schools. A large part of all of this is about spending. Lots of local authorities have got into debt paying for SEND support, and some head teachers worry about their budgets too. Teaching unions have largely welcomed the new plans, but they've said they need to be sufficiently funded.
And this is all about making sure that children get support where they need it and when they need it. So earlier, faster, and avoiding parents having to end up in the fight that they do at the moment.
The government has already set aside £3.7 billion to create more specialist places and hubs in every secondary school. It insists it wants to rebuild trust with families and that new funding for specialists in schools will make a big difference.